Yeah, I read 10 dystopian books in 1 week. So we're starting off with Fahrenheit 451. This is not the first time that I'm reading it, but it has been a couple of years since I have read it. So I read a little bit before my classes and then finished it after school today. Review time, 4.5 out of 5. It's honestly a lot better than I remembered and I loved it, but in my opinion it's not Bradbury's best book. But it's definitely a good start for these dystopian books this week since it reminds me that I'm lucky enough to be able to read all of them. I have more time to read since there's a couple days off school for the holidays, and this morning I read The Chrysalids, I think that's how you pronounce it, and this is one of the books that I haven't read before, so review time, 3.5 out of 5. Honestly, it was a good book, but it's kind of heavy at times and just not exactly my taste, and one important relationship I felt was pretty underdeveloped, like I didn't see it coming at all. But overall, it was well written, and I was surprised when I realized it was published pretty long ago, so it definitely stands the test of time in terms of writing style. Then after lunch, I read The Maze Runner. Review time, 3.5 out of 5. I used to really love this series when I was a kid, and it's been almost 10 years since I've read this book, which is kind of crazy. I do think my nostalgia made it better for me personally, but the characters in the immediate setting were done well. The main problem is that the overarching story of why they were there didn't really make sense to me. But the book is more of a fun read, especially for a dystopian one, and it definitely leans towards more of the YA side of a YA dystopian book. But it's kind of funny that I ended up reading 2 books today that had telepathy in them though. Today I read one by David Karp, which is a lesser known dystopian book than some of the others on this list. Review time, 3 out of 5. It's definitely a solid book, but it is more of a, I'd say, kind of directly philosophical kind of dystopian book. I'm glad that I read it though, and I came away having learned some things, but the main problems I have with it is even though the main concept was really good, the execution and writing style could have been a little bit better, and I do think some parts were kind of dull. Overall though, a good book, but I think one's opinion on the book would just depend on their taste and the mood that they're in when they read it. Today I read Matched, which is more of a romantic dystopian book, and I haven't read this in like a decade, but it was much better than I remembered, so I was really surprised about that. I started reading it at the gym, and one funny thing is actually a character was complaining about a stationary bike while I was literally reading it on a stationary bike. Anyways, review time, 4 out of 5. This one was pretty hard for me to rate because I think it really depends a lot on personal taste, but it did exactly what it was trying to do really well. Like, it's a romance dystopian novel, and it knows that. But in general, the author is definitely good with evoking emotion, and I'll probably actually read the others in the trilogy again eventually. Then after lunch and after doing some homework, I read The Man in the High Castle. Review time, 2 out of 5. It was okay, like it's not a bad book, just not my taste. I think for a dystopian book, it wasn't as creative as I would have liked, and at points, some things were unclear, and I didn't really love the story inside of the story idea, though I did like certain details and end reveals. Now, today we have Station 11, review time, 1.5 out of 5. Honestly, this book was not my taste at all. It also didn't focus much on the dystopian apocalyptic part. It focused more on the stuff before that, so I didn't really expect that going into it.
Morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Let's visit. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
We're not gonna. Be careful.
Hello.
Be careful. You're a good boy.
Honestly, I did like the ending though in one specific reveal, but the majority of the book felt cluttered, disjointed, and sometimes pointless to me. And it just felt like the story the author was trying to tell could have been done in a different way. Overall, not my taste, not really a good book if you're looking for one with a big dystopian focus. Then in the afternoon, I reread The Hunger Games before dinner, but all the talk about food made me so hungry that I had to eat, so I finished it right before bed. Of course, this wasn't my first time reading it, but this time I tried to pay more attention to details since I already knew the story. So, review time, 4.5 out of 5. Honestly, the concept is just perfect. The writing is great. Like, she does such a good job at avoiding plot holes. One funny thing I noticed though is that EM dashes are used so much. The only thing that makes it not perfect for me is that the time in the games can be a little bit repetitive and long, but I do understand that it's necessary. Overall, it's really great. Of course it is. It's The Hunger Games. Today I had school again and I read the classic dystopian book 1984. I read this book years ago, but as I was reading it today, I realized that I completely forgot everything about it, so it was really nice that it felt new. Anyways, review time, 4 out of 5. It's a great book and there were a lot of elements from the characters to the setting to the plot that I thought were well done. But at times it felt like things could have been shortened, and the part where there's, again, a book inside a book, I think should have been done in a different, kind of less direct way. But overall, I see how it's a classic dystopian work, and I'm really glad that I reread it. Today I read the last book in this challenge, which was The Giver. I had something to do later in the afternoon at school, so I read it while I was waiting on campus. Review time, 4.5 out of 5. I read this when I was really young, so again, maybe nostalgia is playing a part in my review, but I do think it's done super well, and even though it's pretty simple, it's that simplicity that makes it really good. I think it's able to do a dystopia in a way that's easy for kids to understand, but also now that I'm older, I still really appreciate. The only things I didn't like was that it did feel a little short, and I definitely wanted more, and also some of the more scientific mechanics of their society didn't really make sense to me, but overall, it's definitely great. Reading these dystopian books this week really made me think about life more. They make me so grateful for all the little things that I take for granted, but they also remind me to pay attention and beware of certain things in life as well. It's important to remember that even though life isn't perfect and it's literally snowing in April, it could be much, much worse. I'll see you in the next one.